Okay, let's talk about the basics of currency exchange. You got to have the basics down if you're going to understand the more complicated parts. Different countries have their own currencies. The United States has a currency. Canada has its own currency, even though they call it a dollar. It's not the same as our dollar. So if you want to do business in these other currencies, you often need to deal in the other currency, which means you as a US business have to give up some of your US dollars and buy this other currency. The flip side is sometimes a customer will pay you in these other currencies and you'll want to convert it to US dollars. So you also need to know exchange rates for if someone gives you these other currencies, you can then go to the bank and sell them for US dollars. And the exchange rate tells you how many US dollars you'll get. Direct quotes and indirect quotes. Let's talk about what the difference is. A direct exchange rate is one as a US company you're going to need the most. It answers the question, how many US dollars does it take to buy 1 unit of the other currency? So if you've agreed to pay someone in euros and they state a price, say 1,000 euros, you as a US company want to know how many US dollars will it take me to get 1,000 euros? Well, the direct exchange rate will answer that question. You might think you're not good at exchange rates, but you are. You've been doing exchange rates probably since you were 7 or 8 years old. Let me give you an example. So let's assume that quarters are not issued by the US government. Let's assume quarters are another country called Quarterland, and that's their currency. So the direct exchange rate will ask you, how many dollars does it take to get one of that other country's currency? Well, just from dealing in US currency, since you were a kid, you know it takes 4 quarters to make a dollar. But the question is how many dollars to get 1 quarter? So hopefully you think to yourself, well, I just need 1/4 of a dollar to get 1 quarter. Okay, you're right. So that would be the direct exchange rate because that tells you how many dollars to get one of that other country's currency. So we only need 1/4 of our currency, the dollar, to get 1 unit of their currency. Let's look at the indirect exchange rate. Now it flips and says, how many of the other country's currency can you get for $1? How many of their currency do they have to give us for us to give them one of ours? Well, since you were a kid, you know that it takes 4 quarters to make a dollar. So that would be the indirect exchange rate. It takes 4 of their currency to make 1 of ours. So let's step back. The direct exchange rate was 0.25. The indirect exchange rate is 4. If you pause, you'll recognize those are reciprocals of each other. You can take 1, divide it into 1, and you'll get the other one. So 1 divided by 0.25 would give you 4. And if you had the indirect exchange rate of 4 quarters equals a dollar, and you want us to know how many dollars makes 1 quarter, you would do 1 divided by 4. Alright, so let's see if you got that. Direct exchange rate. Now there's a country called Nickel Land, and their currency is the nickel. How many dollars does it take to get 1 nickel? Hopefully you didn't have to think too long on that. 1/20th of a dollar would get you 1 nickel. So our currency, on a per unit basis, much more valuable than their currency. So with just 1/20th of a dollar, you can get 1 unit of their currency, the nickel. Let's flip it and say, what's the indirect exchange rate? How many of their currency, the nickel, does it take to get 1 US dollar? The answer is it takes 20 nickels to get 1 US dollar. So the indirect exchange rate is 20 nickels will get you $1. Again, those are reciprocals of each other. 20 is a reciprocal of 1 over 0.05. So with these two examples, I'm trying to get you to see that you deal in exchange rates all the time. It's just you're comfortable dealing in nickels and quarters and dollars, and those exchange rates are fixed and haven't changed in your entire life. Nickel has always been 1/20th of a dollar. Now let's look at one that does change. A bunch of countries in Europe got together to have one standard currency. They call it the euro, and it has an exchange rate against the US dollar. So let's look at those exchange rates. The direct exchange rate again asks the question, how many US dollars does it take to get 1 unit of the other currency? The other currency in this case is the euro. And the answer, as I wrote this, was about $1.32 American money will get you 1 euro. Now we can flip that and say, what's the indirect exchange rate? Which would ask, how many euros does it take to get 1 US dollar? If you followed our previous discussion, you should remember you should be able to trade this into the indirect exchange rate by doing 1 divided by the direct exchange rate. So do 1 divided by 1.32, and that will tell you the answer for the indirect exchange rate is it takes 0.7576 euros to get 1 US dollar. Now in this class, the direct exchange rate is what you will usually need because you're going to be looking at things from the perspective of being a US company that cares about US dollars. So if you have to pay someone in euros, you want to know how many US dollars will it take you to buy the euros you need to make the payment. Or if you have a customer who's going to pay you in euros, once you get those euros, you want to translate them back into dollars. So again, you'll still want to know how many dollars do you get or have to pay for 1 euro. So the direct exchange rate is the one you'll usually use. If a problem gives you the indirect exchange rate, remember it's not hard to translate it. Just do 1 divided by the indirect exchange rate.